How about new space? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so new space is a term that's used to discuss sort of this new commercial market that's come about, fueled mainly by investor dollars. So commercial space is not new by any means. Telstar was the very first commercial satellite. And some of you old enough to remember Telstar was used, I believe, to broadcast the Olympics from somewhere in Europe, or it was Asia, I can't remember which. And that was the first commercially funded satellite. And out of that came a whole generation of commercial telecommunication satellites. And, your typical telecom satellite's going to be $100, $200 million satellite that goes into geostationary orbit, which is to say it's way up there, far enough away from the Earth that it orbits at the same speed that the Earth turns, so it looks like it's just hanging above the Earth. And so to launch that is another couple $100 million. You've got a $500 million to $1 billion asset every time that goes up. So you have to, in order to raise that kind of money commercially, it has to be a very conservative business case, which telecommunications is. And even then, they struggle sometimes. But the government's a customer. If you watch DirecTV, that's direct broadcast. If you listen to Sirius XM, which I do all the time, that's another satellite kind of thing. So what happened in about 2008, 2009 was once SpaceX showed the world that Elon could actually build a rocket with private money, and he went out and found investors. Besides the Google founders, he got Steve Jurvetson, whom I know fairly well, put $50 million in his enterprise. Suddenly, it became okay for a few space investments. And as it turns out, I got involved in one called Skybox. They were some friends of mine now, the spy satellite agency, that came out and said, hey, why couldn't we build spy satellites for $1 million privately instead of $1 billion like the government does? And I said, why not? Right. So I helped them. We were off by a little more than a factor of 20, but it was still better than $1 billion. And we were able to sell the company after we built a few of these satellites to Google for $500 million. So that started a whole wave of more investment in this new space. And, I think last year there was this year rather, there's close to $20 billion of private investments that's gone into space. And it's just growing, right? It's growing every year. And just to calibrate that number, the NASA budget, the entire NASA budget's about $25 billion. So you look at that much money going in, and I submit to you that the commercial private space is probably 50 times more efficient than the government. And I've got data to back that up, from some of the SpaceX stuff. Even if it's only 10 times more efficient, we've got a huge, huge change. It's a sea change in what's going on. So we went from launching about 30 satellites a year to this year we'll launch about 1,300 or 1,400 satellites. And that number is just growing. There's something like 7,000 satellites that need to be launched between now and the end of the decade.
And this is through Phantom Space.
Well, Phantom Space is my company that we're building a rocket to launch these satellites.
Okay. All right. Straighten me out.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Right now, most of them go up on SpaceX big Falcon rockets. So it's like a bus ride to space. There are no dedicated rides small enough for these smaller rockets to speak of. There's one company out of New Zealand called Rocket Lab that's doing it, and I had my hand in that one early on. But SpaceX takes these 50 to 100 satellites up, throws them out, more or less one at a time into orbit. And but the problem is you go on a bus kind of thing. You go where other people want to go, when they want to go. So there's a lot of hidden cost to that sort of thing. At Phantom Space, what our business thesis is there's really two economic systems that are competing in launch, just like there are in terrestrial transportation. There's these large vehicles, which are inherently more efficient, just like a bus. per passenger mile. That's more efficient the bigger the bus. But then again, you have all the logistics issues with, where the bus stops and where it picks you up and where it's going and so forth, and schedules. Whereas, mass manufactured small is the other one. So this is like the personal car. And so at Phantom, we're building small rockets that are mass manufactured using basically Henry Ford's techniques from Detroit. Again, I pulled my automotive experience into this and said, there's no reason why we can't build rockets like cars. And we're also doing the same thing with satellites. So we have a bunch of satellites under contract. And ultimately, yes, we're going to sell the capacity to launch other people's satellites into space for money. But ultimately, our rockets are about what we can do with them, less than it is how much money we can sell them for. Because there's not that many people that can do this. And once you have that capacity to do that, now all of a sudden you start thinking about constellations of satellites that do unique things that you can make even more money on. So the value chain and the amount of money you can make gets better and better once you get into the data side of things. So in the space market, just as an example, there's about $500 billion a year is the market size being spent, and that's in all of commercial plus government space. And of that, about $20 billion a year is the launch services. So you could make a nice business if you had a quarter of that, right? $5 billion a year is not chicken scratch for revenue.
Could be worse.
Yeah. And then $30 billion a year for satellites, same argument, right? But then $300 billion is moving bits back and forth, around the Earth. So if you could do that in a better way, in a more efficient way, just having a small foothold into that is a far better market. So that's ultimately what Phantom's about, is I call those space applications, to, create enough of this technology so that I can engage with the really smart people that know how to come up with these applications. Like our mobile phones, never would have dreamt what we could do with those. We don't know what we can do with these satellites yet. We know some things we can do with them, but certainly not everything. And so my goal is to, through mass manufacturing, make this approachable enough, both financially and technically, so that these smart people and the app kind of thinkers can bring their innovation and have a blank canvas. That's how a revolution in an industry happens. That's how it did in computer. I mean, when I was in college back in the early '80s, I had to get in to my car and drive up to campus to use a computer and wait in line and so forth for mainframes. And, now I've got more computing power in my cell phone that I carry around in my pocket. So, but that came through, making that technology approachable. Websites are an example, right? I used to have to code my own websites, and now you can go out and get, anybody's sign up for anybody's service, and it's just as easy as clicking some pictures and putting them together. It does it all for you. So that's where we've got to go in this business. It's been many, many years. It's been neglected as a nation state kind of business, and we're just applying known principles to it, and hopefully we can make a big difference.
This has been Jeff Stearns, Connected Through Cars.